very much, Heidi. It's lovely to be here in Edinburgh, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak at UCISA15. I've called my talk "When Excellence is a Click Away, Average Just Won't Cut It," as a way to describe the huge disruption that's happening all around us in the digital age. And I'm going to do that by sharing a few thoughts on the following. So, threats to incumbents in higher education, what I'm going to talk about the conceptual age, and the challenge of the digital economy. So, to tell you a small story, a number of years ago I was studying for my postgraduate degree in Warwick Business School. And I was sitting in the lecture hall with my laptop, and Professor John Bennington was recounting an amusing anecdote about governmentium, which was a kind of an ironic look at bureaucracies and government. And if you read the description of governmentium, it takes exactly 1 minute, 35 seconds from start to finish to read out. I, however, of course, had simply Googled it in the lecture hall. I'd found the reference, and I'd cut and pasted it into my notes before he'd even gotten to the second sentence. So that's a time lapse between me and my professor of 60 seconds, okay? And so as the 2-hour lecture progressed, that time lapse started getting longer and longer, because he was talking and I was Googling. And I began to reflect really what exactly was happening in the room. What was the benefit of this really educated man standing in front of me, imparting knowledge which was also encapsulated in his PowerPoint slides? And then at the end of the week's module, and I'm sure you're familiar with this from the university context, we were all presented with these beautiful bespoke folders from Warwick Business School, containing loads and loads of articles for us to read, which some poor administrator obviously had to stand in front of a photocopier and actually physically, punch holes and put into these folders. So that seemed to me a very bizarre way of managing value and labour. So if every minute of his lecture I could shave off 30 seconds, surely we should be finding a better way to use both our time. Because the value of a professor or any academic is the experience and the deep understanding and the nuance that they bring to their subject area, and the understanding that they've amassed over years and years. So I don't really need somebody with that level of brilliance to lay out basic concepts that I can basically research myself. So I need the professor to be available to me when I've understood the concepts, or I have questions or a hypothesis to test. Or when she or he can moderate and add value to the kind of class, really rich discussions that emerge in a university context. So, for example, if he had said something like, these are the things I'll be discussing next week: the theory of everything, the meaning of life, what is poetry, and the question you need to answer is, how do these things fit together, right? So what would I have done? I would have gone off and I would have Googled those, and I would have tried to find the meaningful writers in that, and I would have come to some sort of a proposition. So that's a win both times, because the professor gets to spend more time on meaningful work, right, with real add value, and I get to do the work researching with less time sitting in a lecture taking notes when I can find that on the web. And of course the research that I could also conduct freely on the web to get me started would be cross-referenced with the academic journals that we also had online access to as part of our student resources. And as for the folders, okay, which, so, as I say, some poor unfortunate had to spend ages, wasting his time photocopying. I used a fraction of any of that material, because by the time I came to researching my module essay, I needed much more in-depth information, which of course I then chased down on the web. So it seemed to me that even then the university model was ripe for disruption, since it was operating in a way that really hadn't changed in hundreds of years. So the author Mark Prensky identified this problem as far back as 2011 in his essay Digital Natives versus Digital Immigrants. And he says, "Ours as students have changed radically. Today's students are no longer the people our educational system was designed to teach." And though technically I'm a digital immigrant, since I can remember a time before the web, so hands up here, anyone who can remember a time before the web? Okay guys, you're all digital immigrants. And despite the fact that I've been an early adopter of technology all my life, it seemed to me that the traditional model of university teaching was completely out of step with how I access and ingest knowledge in my daily life. So the model I'm talking about in Warwick in 2008 approximately was no different to the model I'd experienced in my undergraduate life in Ireland in the 1980s. So back then there were lecture notes and books and microfiches. Can you remember microfiches? That really dates me. So Prensky was entirely right. I was no longer the person that the educational system was designed to teach. So I'm not suggesting for a moment that the university experience is only that which takes place in the classroom, on the web or in the library, because of course it's much more than that. And what happens in the Students' Union bar, at the debating society and the networks of friends and foes that emerge over those wonderful years. But if we fast forward to 2015, we know that the emergence of massive online open courses is rattling its saber in the academic community. And of course, there's a lot of controversy and questioning over, what MOOCs are. And we know they're nowhere near usurping traditional academic institutions, not least because many of our elite universities offer unprecedented access to power and influence, which MOOCs can't easily emulate. But remember, as with all threats to incumbents, these offerings are iterating and changing all the time, refining their proposition in the face of massive technological, social and economic pressures. So the author, Clay Christensen, who was the original author of The Innovator's Dilemma, identifies 3 jobs that traditional universities do best: discovery, memory. So discovery, finding and disseminating new knowledge; memory, learning from the lessons of the past; and mentoring, encouraging our next generation. So I think that the threat to incumbents in higher education, in the higher education university market, are going to be those that understand which of these components can be delivered online and which require physical and face-to-face resources. So there are winners already emerging in this space, in the US, such as eCornell. And if a number of things continue to collide, what choices will young people make in the future? If faced with leaving university with debts of upwards of £40,000 before they even begin, to spend 3 years in institutions that no longer understand how they have changed and how their learning methods have fundamentally shifted through game playing and through their deep knowledge of technology, why would they just not fulfill themselves those 3 things that universities currently do best? So discovery, Google search; memory, Google search; mentoring, social media networks. So in a knowledge economy, knowledge is the pertinent point. Does it really matter how we acquire it? So to quote the journalist Tom Friedman, big breakthroughs happen when what is suddenly possible meets what is desperately necessary. As the price of traditional education keeps rising, but the need for education rises even faster, how are we going to redistribute knowledge in a way that acknowledges this growing dissonance? In South Africa in 2012, the University of Johannesburg received 85,000 applications for 11,000 first-year places. Places were offered on a first-come, first-served basis, and one mother who was queuing with her son was killed in the stampede that happened once the university opened its gates. With education seen as a way to secure a better life in so many communities, what can we do if the centre cannot hold? What of those who can't afford to attend university but who need also to balance working or child-rearing? It is obvious to me that big breakthroughs will happen in the higher education market in the digital age that will scale at speed once we reach a tipping point, when the suddenly possible meets what is desperately necessary. And what is desperately necessary for young people now and in the future is the ability to acquire the right kind of knowledge to enable them to benefit in the digital economy. So we have now come to a point, what the author Daniel Pink calls the conceptual age, moving from the agricultural age to the industrial to the information and now to the conceptual. And the conceptual age has come about, according to Pink, because of 3 factors: abundance, Asia, and automation. Which can be done by the machine, will be done by the machine, and this trend will increase at a faster rate as we move forward. Drones, robots, artificial intelligence will all be part of our very near future, hollowing out many jobs. So while, for example, currently there are legislative and safety and weight considerations, Amazon recently confirmed that in the US, 84% of its orders are under £5 and are therefore deliverable by drone. 75% of UPS deliveries meet the same criteria. This means that over 3 million packages that could be delivered, greatly reducing the workload on humans. So the good news for us, I guess, is that will mean fewer cars and trucks on the road and increased convenience for customers. But it also means fewer employees, because drones, after all, don't charge overtime. So while computerization has been historically linked to routine tasks involving explicit rule-based activities, algorithms for big data are now rapidly entering domains reliant upon pattern recognition and can readily substitute for labour in a wide range of non-routine cognitive tasks. In addition, advanced robots are gaining enhanced sensors and dexterity allowing them to perform a broader scope of manual tasks. This is also likely to change the nature of work across many industries and occupations. So, if we think for a moment of the once giant Kodak, with 179,000 employees at the height of its success, because Kodak is a salutary tale. So they invented the digital camera. They were the first out of the blocks, but they were too fearful of what their invention might do to their core film business, and so they never iterated the product. By the time they did, it was too late, and one of America's most iconic businesses went to the wall. Compare this with Instagram, sold to Facebook for $1 billion. At its point of sale, it had 13 employees. Yet strangely, their content wasn't generated by them. It was generated by us. But we're not sharing in the bonanza, right? Our content has made 13 people very wealthy. But there is no redistribution of that in the digital age. So Instagram is a child of the conceptual age, not the industrial age. It is not a thing in the way that we know it. It is not a physical asset, like printed Kodak film. Yet it has the capability to generate vast fortunes for those who create and conceptualize the service. So, do our educational institutions, as they're currently constituted, understand the 6 core values that conceptual workers require? In his book, Again, A Whole New Mind, Daniel Pink suggests that what is required in the following values to complement traditional left brain learning. Design, the aesthetic imperative. Story, the ability to create a compelling narrative. Symphony, the ability to synthesize information to create a compelling narrative. Empathy, understanding networks and relationships. Meaning, a focus on the more spiritual. And play, an understanding of humor and laughter. So these are exactly the values of the digital natives, who express themselves endlessly through creating content that tells their stories, posting photographs that demonstrate their aesthetic sensibilities, synthesizing data and information from various sources, and extracting their own truths. Participating not in our democratic institutions as we know them, but in their own self-selected groups. For them to flourish in their chosen career paths, they need to only answer these 3 questions. Can somebody overseas do it cheaper? Can a computer do it faster? Is what I'm offering in demand in an age of abundance? To move to the challenge of the digital economy, let's look at that challenge of the conceptual age and ask ourselves the questions: are our institutions ready for the next wave of disruption? I do a lot of work in the private sector on digital literacy, digital disruption, digital leadership, and frankly it's quite shocking how often people remark that the technology in their work environments are totally falling behind the demands of their age. So what they have at home is frequently, years above what they're experiencing at work. So in order to compete in the digital economy, institutions and organizations need to fashion their own internal systems and values to meet those that have emerged in external environments. So what does a truly digital organization look like? Because remember, this is not really about technology. It's about values as much as it's about software and systems. So in my view, you can categorize a digital organization by looking at 3 things. Ooh, missing a slide there. There it is. It's people, it's platforms, and it's performance. So people who work in truly digital organizations don't fear failure. It's a central tenet of software development that perfection is the enemy of the good. What's important is to fail fast, and to learn. And this is how the companies of the future are evolving. So collaboration, not silos, is a natural state of play. And those who have grown up in the web treat the web like their own external brain. They understand and expect knowledge to come from many sources, and to be able to access that knowledge from pop star, politician, or professor in a very flat world. Transparency and authenticity is valued much more than command and control. Shared values are more important than diktats from the boardroom, and those at all levels of the organization expect to be listened to if they feel they have a good idea or better ways of doing things. Digital organizations rely heavily on collaboration software as a means of communication and workflow management. They're not drowning in emails copied into lots of people to deal with a risk-averse culture. They use lightweight tools like Slack relegating email only to the very necessary. They use open source, subscription-based products that are agile and low cost, turning away from bespoke solutions like SAP that are counterintuitive and non-user friendly. They expect to be able to access information as easily as they do from Google in a single search, rather than having to use the internal document storage system that takes more time and causes more friction. They want things open by design and closed by exception. So they want to use products like Gmail and Google Docs and restrict the really confidential stuff to the very few in the organization who really need it. That way they don't get bogged down in unnecessary and cumbersome security that's designed to lock things down when they don't need to be. They need networks that are accessible from anywhere, internally or externally, supported by high speeds with 24/7 support. And they expect to work from home. So if you can't offer them that, they will work from home if they have better networks there. And they expect to be trusted to work as efficiently from a cafe as from a cubicle. In terms of performance measurement, they want to be valued by their outcomes and not by the time they spend processing or completing tasks. They don't want annual appraisals, looking back over things that have happened in the past that they've long forgotten or have learned from already, but they want constant real-time feedback from both internal and external users. They value less what their managers say about them than the real-time customers and users accessing their services. What external people say about them means more to them than internal or managerial assessments. So the digital native of the workforce is now, and they're coming to get you at a very rapid pace. So the time is now, in my view, for current leaders and managers not to simply catch up, but to leapfrog into the future. To begin now dismantling organizational structures that were designed for the analog and not for the digital age. So this isn't about whether organizations should allow their staff use Facebook. I get asked that question so often. Should I allow staff use Facebook? It's like, seriously? Right? Because these channels are already well embedded in our everyday life and already changing in their demographic usage. Consider that Facebook, for example, is losing lots and lots of more young people. Or as one young teenager blogged so brilliantly on the web recently, describing Facebook as the awkward family dinner you can't really leave. So the questions that organizations need to ponder about is not the changing landscape of social media, for example, but a much more profound question about values and relationships. Are they the closed command and controlled, insular, hierarchical, siloed organization forged in the era of the analog? Or are they ready to embrace the chaos that is the reality of the digital age? We really are only in our learning stage about what the digital economy will bring, and there will be winners and losers. The only sure thing I know is that those who think it will not happen as fast are going to face a difficult time in the next few years, because after all, as we all know, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Thank you.